Hi, Rachel from the AI Exchange here. I'm going to walk you through a quick example of how to use AI to categorize or classify example customer support emails. We're going to be using GPT in Google Sheets, and in this tutorial, I'm going to walk through how to install the extension, as well as how to set up a Google Sheet to be able to use GPT, and then some examples of prompts and how we did this classification task in our own business. Let's dig in. So first, we're going to set up GPT in Google Sheets. If you have not used Google Sheets before, you can get to it by going to sheets.new in a Google Chrome browser. Once you're in a Google Sheet, it will look like this. You will need to install the extension. So to do that, you go to Extensions, you go to Add-ons, Get Add-ons, and in the extensions, you will search for GPT for Sheets. We prefer this extension, so click on it, and then you're going to click Install. Now, once you've done that, the other step you will need to do to fully set up this extension is to add your API key. If you've never used OpenAI's API before, what this enables you to do is access the AI model behind ChatGPT, which is called GPT, meaning you can pull it into some of your other tools and do things like build automations, have more flexibility, customizability, and beyond. We really recommend learning how to do this. It really unlocks a lot of opportunities for you. So to go ahead and get that API key, what you'll do is you need to go to beta.openai.com/playground. You'll need to create an account if you don't already have one. You'll need to put in a credit card so that you can pay for the API usage. It is typically quite cheap to run these API calls. It's about 2 cents for every 750 words that you either send to OpenAI or get back from it. It's not free, but it is usually very affordable. So to go and find your API key, once you're in the playground, you will go to the top right-hand corner, you will click View API Keys, and you will create a new secret key. It will pull up a modal with that key in there. We recommend grabbing that key and putting it in a secure place to save it for later, because once you create it, it becomes a secret and you will not be able to access it again. You will need to create a new one, which is quite annoying, but secure. So then once you've done that, you have your API key, you're going to go back to your Google Sheets. You're going to go to Extensions, GPT for Sheets, Set API Key, and when you click on this, it will pull up a modal where you can add your API key. Next, I'm going to talk about how to structure your Google Sheet for using GPT, and in particular, this classification task. This is the structure we use. We like having a column to describe the approach or the type of prompt that we are using, which I'll elaborate on in a minute. Then we like to have a column for the prompt. This is the instructions that you give to OpenAI, the first piece of it. Then we have the second column, which is the value, which we think of this as like the variable that you're sending in with the prompt. In our case, this will be the customer support email. And then we have a final column, which has the results from GPT-3. Now, to get started with this classification task, the first thing you will need to do is add a bunch of your customer support emails. We have added a bunch of examples here that we generated. These are obviously placeholders for demo purposes. Before digging into all the different rows here, I'm going to show you with one row how we use GPT to generate the classification. So again, we have our prompt, our value, and then this final column. To get started using GPT, all you need to do is type GPT, and then you grab your prompt, and you do comma, grab your value, and parentheses, and press enter. It says loading when it's sending that request to OpenAI, and then when it gets the request back, it puts it in this column. Simple enough. Now let's talk about why we have so many rows here. This is how we have been testing prompts. While there's many prompt guides and many prompt best practices, the reality is that the best prompt will vary based on your use case. When we did our task, we tested a variety of prompts to see what worked best and gave us the most consistent, high quality. As you can see here, the prompt is classify the following email as return, question, shipping, or other. And our result didn't really match that. It did say return, but it didn't say just return. It had other stuff in it. The next idea we had was to have the different categories that we wanted in return in quotes in our prompt to see if that gave us a better result. So now we're going to do the same thing again. GPT, grab our prompt, grab our value, send it to OpenAI. And great, we did just get the word return. Now, we could have stopped here, but we were also interested in exploring some other approaches, especially just because it works for one example doesn't mean it's going to work for all of them. And so we had a couple of other tests that we ran. One test we ran was using one shot, which is another way to say one example. Our prompt here, we said classify the following email as return question shipping other. Then we had an example email. Then we had an example output, which was return. And then we added the input again, which is classify the following email. And then that gets sent in addition to the email and the value column, both to OpenAI. So you think of it as it's stacking that prompt. And then we can see how that performs. So again, we do the prompt and the value. And the result we got is output dash return. So this also can be a very reliable way to get the exact response that you want by giving GPT an example. Now we did another example with a few shots or a few examples. This is a very similar prompt. It just has multiple emails. This could be useful if the way that you're classifying emails doesn't really match intuition. And so when we ran this, again, we're just going to copy and paste down. It also worked quite well and said the email was an email about returns. Now, this final example I want to share just in case it's useful for your use case. So there are some situations where GPT is better at classifying using gibberish than using plain English. Typically, I've seen this happen where the classification task you're doing maybe has a little bit too much context kind of loaded in those words. And so GPT is like too smart for its own good. In these cases, it might be more beneficial to ask GPT to classify the emails in gibberish or some type of code. What we did was we made up little codes and then we sent in a new example input. And now you'll see it did not correctly classify this return email. It says it's a question email. And this is just a good example of how sometimes certain prompts can work well for some use cases, but you'll need a different approach for a prompt for a different use case. So I hope this has been helpful and has given you a starting point for using GPT to classify text or data that you may have. If you are not already a subscriber, we share use cases and research on how to apply AI 2 times per week in our newsletter, the AI Exchange. We will add the link to go subscribe down below. Thank you so much for watching and best of luck with using GPT.